Welcome wherever you are listening from. This is David Liggett with Data Center Hawk, and this is our fourth podcast. I know that because we did some research. This is the fourth one we've done, and we're excited to be here this morning wherever you're listening from. Thank you for taking time to hear what we are discussing. If you haven't joined our podcast before, our content is... I know this is going to surprise a lot of you with Data Center Hawk, but our content is heavily around the data center industry. So we're going to talk about some different things today. What we've talked about in the past has been why companies are leasing data centers, which is definitely something that we've seen change the market over the last several years. We've discussed specifically how the data center industry has changed over the last 10 years. I personally have been in the data center business, which is, I think most people would agree it's changed dramatically. And today I'm excited because we actually have our first official guest on our podcast content. So Rob Nash-Boulden, we'd like to welcome you to the Data Center Hawk podcast.
Thank you. You did welcome me.
Yes.
In the lobby, personally, with coffee. So
that's right. So we take care of our guests here.
That was nice.
Well, we're really excited to have you here. We're going to talk through some of your background in the space. You've been in the industry a long time, and so I want people to get a really good understanding of kind of your mindset, your past experience, and how that impacts what you're doing today. And then we're also going to do something that we've never done before, which I think will be really fun. And we're going to go through how we believe, and some other folks in the industry believe, that data will change over the next 10 years. So I think this is fascinating because it impacts so many parts of the data center space. The physical real estate that the data actually resides in, the technology that's surrounds those facilities and that information that's in that space, and then how the end user, the consumer, and how the business is utilizing that data to make decisions. So I think that's the world we live in different aspects. And so we're going to cover an article that IDC wrote kind of towards the end of 2017 called "Data Age 2025: The Evolution of Data to Life Critical." So it's actually a really interesting article. We both have read it and talked through it. So yeah, excited. You are here for the Data Center Dynamics Conference, I think, which you're speaking on later today. And I'm trying to remember what you didn't tell me what you're speaking on, but what are you talking about later today?
Oh, it's I have been engaged with Data Center Dynamics since about the end of 2015. Okay. We wrote a white paper in late 2016, early 2017 about Edge.
Okay, cool.
So it was one of the early papers.
Yeah.
If I could write it again, I could add to it because things have changed.
Things have changed a bit, yeah.
But it holds up pretty well, actually. And so we've been engaged with DCD primarily with their focus days talking about Edge.
And your deal today will cover Edge and maybe how it's changed over the last several years?
Yeah, okay. I just continue to evolve the white paper presentation and try and create new and interesting content around the existing and developing use cases. Yeah. So talk about from the theoretical, try to get it to the practical. Yeah. So that people quit defining and talking about what it could be and say things like autonomous vehicles a lot of times in a row. Sure. We try to break it into use cases that we think the audience finds more applicable to maybe where their businesses are going.
Yeah, I think that's that is one of the challenges is putting realistic frameworks around a lot of the data center industry speak that is futuristic in thinking, and so I think that's makes a lot of sense. And
if you can get from theoretical to practical,
let's go. I like it.
Is not as easy as just talking about what could happen.
Yes. Well, so you have been around the data center world for a long time. You're at Black & Veatch today, so maybe give us a brief overview of what you're doing today there, and how you're directly involved in the data center industry.
So I work in the data center business unit for Black & Veatch.
Okay.
It's one of our lines of business today, as our power, our energy and power group, our water and water infrastructure groups, and our telecommunications groups. those exist in addition to another dozen business lines, maybe like data centers that are smaller or new and developing or niche. Could be microgrids or smart integrated infrastructure groups. It could be software through Atonics. It could be investment or development, but data centers. And my role is a business development role.
Sure.
So I'm helping sell data center stuff at Black & Veatch.
Yeah. Well, and when did that practice start? I know we talked about you starting over there several years ago, but when did the actual practice itself start within the company?
I joined about a year after the business line came out of the Growth Accelerator as an initiative.
Yeah.
So that seemed to spawn in about 15, and I joined in 16.
Okay, and it seems like it fits, with all those other, lines of business, this really would fit within that well, I would imagine.
It's a great natural extension of infrastructure, which is what Black & Veatch does really, really well, from engineering and constructing power, water, and telecommunications projects. Data centers is a natural fit. Yeah, we agree.
You are, so before Black & Veatch, kind of walk us through how you got to that role and kind of your history in the data center space industry.
So prior to joining Black & Veatch, I had been either president or managing director, running my own firm, leading another firm, working in the acquisition space, some of the areas where you and I first got engaged.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I worked in commercial real estate for a grocery chain. I really found my way through a company that was kind of maybe the breakthrough opportunity for me career-wise was a company called Compel, which was an infrastructure integrator that was designing and building data centers of all things in the late 90s. An electrical contracting company that was wiring buildings with communications cabling that was then engineering and constructing data centers.
Was that throughout the U.S.?
My hook.
Or
yeah, it was primarily U.S. I mean, there were international projects, but it was primarily U.S. And it was early internet. It was putting in kiosks and point-of-sale systems for convenience stores and that wiring package, or it could have been Earthlink or someone that was wiring call centers. It was early days, and that was really kind of the data center impetus and where I got the bug to really work in that space.
Yeah, well, and if you think about, I mean, again, like early 2000s, I was in college, not to date myself or date you, but I mean, that time period in the industry itself, and then obviously the fall off after the .com bust. I think it's interesting because people I sit down with, a lot of the people that I sit down with that are now leading companies, I mean, that's where they learned a lot about the space. And it was almost like if you're in the space before and you can kind of get through this time and understand how this type of not only real estate, but technology is going to change the world moving forward, the opportunities down the road would be big. And I think that's proven to be true. I mean, a lot of the CEOs we talk with, a lot of the folks that are leading sales side of companies, that's where they learned the business was during that time period.
Yeah, everybody had a develop. If you're a leader of business today, your development happened in one of those market leading industries or market leading firms that may or may not still be around.
Yep.
But where everybody cut their teeth and were great places to learn.
Yep.
And I think that's true. When you look at the industry today and who's out there making it happen, they've changed the business card a few times and learned from those other places that they've worked. That's same for you.
Yeah, you bet. So when you think about so one thing I told you before this, I was looking through your background. And you had a pretty long stint, or pretty long period with a company that you basically started in high school or maybe in college doing some different things for, basically worked your way up to a significant position and then ended up kind of going into the data center industry. But talk about that for a second, because I love the data center stuff that we talk about. It's great and it's interesting to our listening audience, but I also like the personal side of how people have really grown and learned and what sticks out to them that were real differences. And one of the things that I saw you write about was just some of the things that you did that I think, teach a person about hard work, teach a person at a younger age about, hey, if you want to, get somewhere, if you want to take steps, you got to work hard. So talk about that experience and what that was like.
Digging ditches.
Come on, let's go.
Well, the calluses are gone, but the scars are still probably there. Well, I worked at Fry's Food Stores for 18 years, okay. and I did start out bagging groceries in high school, working weekends and making $3.35 an hour for minimum wage in 1982, and it was fantastic. And I worked there almost right up till 2000 when I moved into the technology industry. Yeah. So, I bagged groceries in high school. I mopped floors and picked up boxes, and worked at the customer service counter, sold lottery tickets and money orders, and told people what aisle ketchup was on. And it was aisle 10 on the left, by the way. It's probably still there.
Note that, everyone, so you can go get some ketchup.
And worked my way through. We developed the first point-of-sale systems and electronic bookkeeping systems, so I became the PC coordinator in the corporate office. I worked in accounting and finance. Then later was recruited by the vice president of real estate, who was looking for someone to assist him in developing commercial shopping center, property management, and financial analysis. A lot of pro forma around would a store work in a location, and when would it work from a financial standpoint. And then we learned how to assess a land bank and acquire commercial sites, and then build grocery stores and sell off the shops and pads. So it was fantastic. And I had a mentor, one of the great mentors of my career, a guy named Terry Marshall, who took me under his wing and taught me his business. I had a little desk in the corner of his office. So sometimes when he had an important meeting, I had to leave. Sometimes I got to stay. Sometimes I had to leave. But I didn't have a desk. I had a table in the corner of Terry's office. But what a great place to learn.
Yeah, so what was when you think back about that experience, what was one of the biggest lessons or biggest, leadership takeaways that you learned from that?
What he taught me were a lot about relationships and people skills. Okay. I would watch the commercial real estate brokers, the developers and landowners, many of whom are still very prominent players in the real estate market today, especially in Phoenix, where this happened. He had a way of talking to those folks that just made them feel important. Good listener, great record-keeping skills, phone logs, filing systems, everything by the book. But he had a program, he had a system, and it worked. And if you paid attention, you were going to learn a lot. So it gives us all a great foundation. Those of us who are fortunate to have a mentor, if you're looking and listening, watching him conduct meetings, watching him in the real estate committee, find a way to explain the possibilities of a location, educate, and build consensus.
Yeah, that's good.
So it was fun.
Yeah, that's good. I had out of college, I worked for...
He's going to love this.
A sports camp called Kanakuk in Missouri. And so it's a big sports camp. It sees, around 20,000 kids a summer. I mean, it's a massive organization. And the guy I got to work with was he started the camp, ran it, a guy named Joe White, just huge mentor for me. The two things, and I actually was with him this weekend for a little bit and had dinner with him on Saturday night and had a conversation around this, but the two things that I feel like he taught me, one was, he was the hardest worker I've ever seen. And he would even probably tell you to a fault sometimes. I mean, he just, his mind goes and it doesn't stop. And but he was such a hard worker. And then the second thing that he taught me that I thought was so good was he made, their organization during the summer is gigantic because they hire all these college students to come in, run things. So it's like around 2,000 to 3,000 college students, and then all the people that it takes to do that. During the year, it's a smaller group. But one thing he did that was so good is he made the people that you would look at in an organization and think were on the lower end of the totem pole, he made them feel like they were an integral part of the company. And if they didn't do their job, the company would fall apart. Wow, and he just had such a very good relational style that when you're in an organization like that or a culture like that, it's it totally changes. People love coming to work. They don't dislike coming to work. They love what they do anyway. So
that's team building before there was team building.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Anyway, it was really fun to get to connect with him. But your comment just about mentors in general, I think, for younger professionals getting into this space, there's some great people that you can learn from, and
I think we have a bit of an obligation to pay that forward as well, having received good mentorship.
You bet.
If you get a chance, you should
give it back. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so tell me about. You mentioned this, I believe, when you were talking about where Black and Veatch is focused, but you all have some interesting comments on your website about smart cities and tying technologies together. Talk about y'all's background in that and how you're approaching that today.
Well, smart city is really infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So transportation systems, energy systems, and water systems connected so that real-time decision-making can take place to allocate resources wisely, efficiently. It makes a lot of sense. Yep. Public infrastructure, shared infrastructure, is one of maybe the most obvious platforms for connected infrastructures. Mm-hmm. So smart city has to do with the things that we use every day and don't even think about, the lights, the building air conditioning systems, and our transportation systems that really are connected infrastructure. So Black and Veatch has smart integrated infrastructure at its core. This is the foundation of the business, and then telecommunications and other layers, even like data centers, eventually kind of lay on top of that.
Yeah, interesting. Before we dive into this article, are you a sports fan?
Yeah, big time.
Give me the sports that you follow and the teams you like to follow.
Who are my teams?
Yeah, man.
Oh gosh, this is very
revealing.
It is. So I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up loving the local teams, and it's still the case. I live in Arizona, so I love the local teams in Arizona. I'll watch a lot of games. Okay. One of my favorite sports is still baseball, which is not as popular today. Sure. But I mean, shoot, I'll go to Birmingham, Alabama, and go watch a Barons AA baseball game on 50-cent hot dog night because I love watching baseball.
That's fun. Yeah,
it's
that's
great.
Yeah.
But so the Arizona sports teams, I love the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals. Okay. I follow the Suns and used to a little bit more.
Yeah.
And the Coyotes. I follow hockey a lot. I've got a kid that plays the sport.
Interesting.
And she's a ASU women's hockey goalie, so she goes to Arizona State, where her mom and I both went.
Okay.
And love the kid, love the game. Yeah. So we watch a lot of hockey.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what is it like having a daughter that is playing goalie? And I just mean, what a interesting position, different position than your forwards and would it be forwards in hockey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
This is a dumb question. We can edit this out, but in hockey, is it similar to the way soccer would be? And I mean, you've got forwards, midfielders. I guess you got
really similar
linesmen.
Very similar.
Okay, I'm getting some of the speak here.
What are
the things that you positions?
So the thing about goalie is it's a team sport. And the goalie is the last line of defense.
Sure.
It's incredibly stressful to watch.
Oh, my gosh.
To think that if that piece of vulcanized rubber gets past your little girl, everyone in the stands is going to be disappointed. So her mom and I both
that'd be tough.
Watch as patiently and quietly as we can.
Yeah.
And we just kind of say
a
lot.
Yeah. I bet.
And she usually gets them, so it works out. But it's hard. You can't really win the game.
Yeah.
It's tough for the goalie to win the game,
sure.
But certainly it can go the other way.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Stress.
Well, that's awesome. So ASU, is that Herm Edwards?
Herm Edwards is the football coach at Arizona State. Are
you excited about that?
I think he's doing a pretty good job. Yeah. We'll see when he gets some of his own recruits.
Yes.
That's always the trick. It seems as though coaches can come in and win with other coaches' players sometimes.
Yeah.
And have some good first-year success. They beat USC this weekend.
Sure.
In California,
so
which
you'll
is
take it?
Rare.
Yeah,
Arizona State cannot win a road game in California. It's it's really will sort of be on their tombstone.
Yeah.
Couldn't win road games in California. Yeah. We're always fourth in the Pac-12.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. Thanks for sharing that. And I love I think people hearing the backgrounds of people that we're talking to is always good. And before we dive into some more detailed data center industry stuff, so thanks for sharing that. So I do want to talk about specifically this article that I've mentioned, or this white paper that I've mentioned, that IDC put together, talking about how data will grow over the next 10 years. And there's some really fascinating things that I found in here. I think it has implication to the data center industry, how people use technology, both from a business and consumer perspective. So I want to read through some components of this. I think if you're listening, wherever you're listening from, you follow the data center industry, you will understand why this is, impacting our space. But again, this is the title of this article is Data Age 2025: The Evolution of Data to Life Critical. So, and it was an IDC paper towards the end of 2017. Okay, so imagine being awoken and tended to by a virtual personal assistant that advises you on what clothing from your wardrobe is best suited to the weather report and your schedule for the day, or being transported by your self-driving car. Or perhaps you won't need to commute to an office at all, as technology will allow you to conjure workspaces out of thin air using interactive surfaces, and holographic teleconferencing becomes the norm for communicating virtually with colleagues. Weekends may involve browsing new furniture through an augmented reality app and seeing how a sofa looks in your living room before placing an order. As you relax on the new sofa, Saturday night's takeout will be a pizza made by a robot and delivered in record time by a drone. So let me stop there for a second.
Doesn't sound that great. The pizza robot drone, like pizza?
Yeah.
That's the best we can come up with in this new digital age.
Yeah. So
pizza.
I guess so this is obviously very forward thinking, but is something like this a reality? And I mean, this kind of ties back to, you're talking about infrastructure being connected, but this is really showing how our lives would be connected by technology, and there is a digital footprint to all of this stuff that has to be there for it to happen. Is this a reality?
Sure. This that isn't really even very hard to imagine. Mm-hmm. As I was listening and reading, I thought this sounded like tomorrow rather than 5 or 10 years from now. This seems imminent. Mm-hmm. Did you hear anything that you thought, well, that'll never happen?
No. Some of
maybe the conjuring workspaces
sure.
from Minority Report kind of stuff. But in general, that all seems like stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I think to an extent there is probably just personal preference on how people do certain things, but and I think that's one of the things that's interesting, especially as you consider the age of people that are utilizing technology and how they utilize it. As we started Data Center Hawk, what we recognize is we're building a technology platform for people that are not necessarily on as focused on social media platforms. They're on typically like the other side of the, technology, I would say, adoption curve. And so trying to figure out how do we create things that are easy enough to use, but also show a big enough benefit. And so I think some of that, is probably a challenge within this stuff. But, to your point, I think there are some things in here that are already happening today.
It does seem like imminent items. I'm like,
yes.
What's next?
Yes.
After that, how do you take from virtual sofa fitting or wardrobe selection
yes.
and pizza delivery to what can be beyond that? Those sounds like table stakes almost.
Yeah, you bet. And one thing, when we started Data Center Hawk 2014, the data center industry had been growing pretty consistently. The 3 or 4 years before that, in 2015 to 2018, it really changed. So there's just been remarkable growth in the data center industry, really housing, obviously, a lot of the both cloud infrastructure and other enterprise infrastructure that's out there today. But this article is really interesting because IDC forecasts that by 2025, the global data sphere will grow to 163 zettabytes. And so that's 10 times the 16.1 zettabytes of data generated in 2016. So let me just repeat that. They're saying today, or 2016, there were 16.1 zettabytes. By 2025, So 9 years, there will be 163 zettabytes, 10 times the growth of data being created, being stored. What are your thoughts on that as far as just that amount of growth and how potentially that impacts the industry?
I mean, yes, it seems incredibly likely that those projections will be low. As a couple things have to occur, and will along the way. This is necessity as the mother of invention for this stuff, right?
Sure.
That terabyte class storage, flash storage, local storage will exist.
Yep.
When you look at where data is going to come from, and then you also have to think about the U.S. versus the world.
Sure.
We're here in Dallas. What's happening here versus what's going to happen everywhere? It seems like that kind of data growth is imminent. It also seems, and I subscribe to the theory of data gravity, that the more data there is, the more services and applications that there are that are attracted to it. And it becomes a virtuous cycle because that creates more data, which creates more attraction. This may give some of the big cloud players a tremendous advantage, or those that have important, valuable data are going to have a lot of gravity working in their favor.
Sure.
So that seems as though it's sort of imminent as well.
Yeah. So
what do you think?
Yes. I mean, I think that
Yes.
I think the challenge is so much of and this is not with this paper, but so much of when you talk about the future, it's really defining what is realistic. And I think that, certainly by the IDC, I mean, they've got really good numbers behind their predictions of that growth to be 10 times what it is today. And so I think it makes sense given the way, at least if I look at the way and I'm tying this specifically to the data center industry, but if I look at this, the way that has grown over the last 4 years, it's no surprise to me that, we're going to start growing exponentially beyond that. And especially as you've seen some companies in the space do some things that they weren't doing 4 or 5 years ago that's really transformed the market, in my opinion. The article, identifies 5 key trends that intensify the role of data in changing our world. So one of them I want to talk, or a couple of them I want to talk about. The first one is the evolution of data from business background to life critical, because I think this is driving a number of interesting technologies that are out there today. But they say once siloed, remote, inaccessible, and mostly underutilized, data has become essential to our society and our individual lives. They say that by 2025, nearly 20% of the data in the global data sphere will be critical to our daily lives, and nearly 10% that will be hypercritical. So this, I think, ties back into some of the tying infrastructure together as well as tying technology together. That growing in importance, not just for consumers, but also for businesses. Are you seeing that with the people and the companies that you sit down with and talk to?
Well, I think it seems as though there's still a couple of schools of thought on how that will go, and really defining what the paper calls the critical data, the important data. There's going to be, and there is, a lot of data points and information being generated.
Yes.
And as this exponential growth occurs, consensus is that it will be machine-produced data rather than human-produced data.
Yep.
So the Internet of Everything devices will be generating the data. The data curation portion of this is what's really interesting to me, because what part of that data set is the important, or as the white paper talks about, the life-changing or critical parts of it. How do you glean that from all of the system of data that's being generated? How do you get the good stuff? And then what do you do how do you curate the good stuff in using kind of a museum terminology to make sure that it's not only conserved or curated for sharing, but then used for the betterment of lives,
that's good.
Or capitalized for business to be a financial advantage.
And I think this mentions that the businesses that will win are the ones that can determine what is the most important data so number one, it's just determining what's most important to our business, what are the metrics we need to follow for our business, and then how will we actually change our business in response to those, items. And I think that's one of the challenges with so much information. And we're in that world today. It's not just in, how much data is being created, but it's how many articles you can read. It's how many white papers you can get your hands. It's, there's just so much information. It is truly determining what information am I going to let really dictate the steps I take as a person as well as a business. And I think
how will you use it?
Yeah.
How will you analyze it? What frame of reference will you have? What lens will you look at it with? Because if you use the wrong one, you'll just invariably interpret it. It won't be to your advantage.
Yes. And so another trend they talk about is regarding mobile and real-time data. It talks about the data will need to be instantly available whenever and wherever anyone needs it. And just ask my kids on that one. But industries around the world are undergoing digital transformation motivated by these requirements. So they're saying by 2025, more than a quarter of data created in the global data sphere will be real-time in nature, and real-time Internet of Things data, IoT data, will make up more than 95% of this.
Machine-generated data.
I mean,
mobile data has to be. The Wi-Fi networks aren't everywhere.
Yep.
Laptops and PCs aren't available to a lot of people in this world. We have them. Some of us have a bag full of them, but that's not the case everywhere. Mobile networks make the most sense, and all data that's going to be utilized, the stuff we're talking about using to improve our lives, improve our business, it's going to be viewed through a mobile lens. Mobile networks have to be the link from the edge back to the core.
Sure.
And for us to be able to use it real time. You're looking at it, I think the paper looks at it the right way. Mobile network growth has to be the vast majority of where that's going to come from.
Yeah, and not just, I think what's interesting too is the international growth of that. And I'll give you a good example. Probably, 8 or 9 years ago, I was on a mission trip with several folks in Africa. And this stuck out to me as really interesting because we were in a challenging environment where people didn't have a lot, but most everybody there had a cell phone.
Yeah.
Had a mobile, they were connected. And so there's somewhere in here, and I don't remember where it is, that talks about how by 2025, 75% of the world's population will be, connected through some sort of device. And I think that's that alone right there, and the exciting things, but also the challenges that creates, makes, I think, our industry really dynamic over the next several years.
I think that's a really interesting case for a couple billion people on this planet who don't have bank accounts, but might have access to a cell phone.
Yeah.
When you say the growth will come from mobile,
Yep.
it just makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Where there isn't government trust, where there aren't systems in place. We have credit cards. We have ways to order things, buy things. That just doesn't exist everywhere.
Yeah.
That mobile growth is really, really hard to estimate. It could be a lot more than 10 times.
No, I agree with that. This talks about, so the article highlights how the data center industry has changed and how companies are storing the data differently. It talks about before 1980, the data resided almost exclusively in purpose-built data centers by these companies themselves. Then if you look at like 1980 to 2000, really with the rise of the personal computer, data centers evolved from mere data containers to become centralized hubs that managed and distributed data across a slow but developing network to end devices. And then it talks about we're in this third kind of era today, 2000 and beyond, where with the growth of wireless broadband, faster networks, this encouraged data's movement into the cloud, decoupling data from specific physical devices and ushering in the era of accessing data from any screen. So data centers expanded into cloud infrastructure through things like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and other companies. And that's really where we are today.
Virtualization of mobile networks.
Yes. I mean, that is, and that's really the growth I feel like that we've seen in the data center industry more than ever. So with your background with Edge, get in your presentation later today, give me a thought on how you see, what's your takeaway on how you see that users and the growth of this information or the data changing the way the edge operates in the next 3 to 5 years?
So the edge to me, and we talked about this last week at Edge Congress in Austin. Infrastructure Masons had a little brainstorm session when we talked about edge masons a little bit. Latency is the factor that we're solving for when it comes to edge.
Sure.
A lot is written about networks. A lot is written about mobile applications. What there isn't a lot written about is storage. Again, I think flash memory and localized storage, mobile networks with the ability to edge to edge or mobile to mobile communications seems like the most efficient way because latency is the solve. So it has to go from you to me without going anywhere else possibly. That would be the most effective way, would be to be able to beam it to each other.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's kind of cool about the edge conversation, and we try to break that down more to the practical applications and use cases, and talk about what's happening with edge rather than what could happen with edge.
That's good.
So it's fun.
Well, it's it's definitely something I think that's on everybody's. I feel like we did some podcast or something where I said something like the edge is the new cloud, and my point in that was, I feel like 5 years ago we were all talking about how cloud will impact the market, and I think today, to an extent, there's a big focus on edge and how that will transform the industry.
Yeah, but you were right. I mean, edge is distributed cloud.
Sure.
So
I appreciate
you already
that.
nailed it.
I appreciate that. So I want to talk for a second about artificial intelligence. One of the things this article does a very good job of is identifying. I can't remember while we were recording this or not, but you made a comment about like when people think of AI, they just talk about autonomous cars and how that will impact things. But there's obviously other business sectors and industry or verticals that are using AI to really change the way their businesses operate. This points out 5 of them that are really good. So I just thought I'd read each one and then get your take on how the companies that you all are working with potentially are using this as well. So, one is specifically around the automotive industry. Driverless cars seen already on some city streets rely on real-time data to learn how to drive. Advances in these underlying cognitive systems will shorten the time needed to teach driverless cars how to drive. Insurance companies like AIG have been using artificial intelligence-based agents and virtual engineers to support live claims agents and increase productivity. From a healthcare perspective, IBM's Watson cognitive platform is using tools like natural language processing and machine learning to help target and solve individualized cancer treatments. From an entertainment perspective, Disney's using facial. This is interesting. Facial recognition on different cruises that they're on, and so these are pictures that they play animated scenes when a passenger walks by. The system uses facial recognition to ensure that on subsequent visits, the passenger doesn't see the same scenario. So I thought that was interesting. And then from a financial perspective, most credit card companies like MasterCard routinely use AI to help with fraud detection. This enables them to detect a fraudulent transaction in as little as 40 to 60 milliseconds. So the companies that you're working with, what's their take on AI? Are these like mature companies that are so far ahead of the rest, or are you seeing like other companies that might not be as big or have the technology budgets that some of these companies would to really be able to explore AI and how it can help their business?
So for our business, a lot of the initiatives are probably infrastructure related.
Yep.
And you're right, Disney and AIG are pretty good examples of robust Fortune 100s that have access to tools that Black & Veatch and Data Center Hawk might not.
Sure.
So that gives them some advantage, certainly in terms of their ability to use AI. But they're really paving the way for us, and I'm glad for it, because the rest of the businesses like our own will be able to take those lessons and apply them to our businesses and look at them through our own lens. It's also interesting in what we sort of deem as AI, because there's to me, I think there's a pretty fine line between analytics and artificial intelligence. So in the Disney example, if you said, we're playing different videos to see who looks at the video, whose attention was captured, that's one data point. And then to say, well, if they like that, they'll love this, and let's not bore them with the same content over and over in a loop. Where's the line between analytics and just using that data to make better business decisions? And then where does the advertising or financial benefit come from? For AIG, maybe less claims reps, more efficient, better customer experience. I had an accident, I hit an app, I take a picture, I submit a claim. Efficiency, right? So customer experience. Disney, also very much about enriching the customer experience. That's where the tipping point is between analytics and analyzing that data and then applying it and making use of it.
And I think that's the challenge that probably all companies face, is identifying, it kind of ties back to what we said before, but identifying what this data really allows us to do and how it really helps our business. What's the impact? I think there's a lot of companies that get into we need more data and we need, more information, and that sounds like cool. And we should be these companies are doing this, we should be doing that. And I don't think that's always the best decision, just because it can be overwhelming if you don't have a really good plan with how you're going to use the information.
You can wait just a little bit and stand on the shoulders of greatness and do just fine.
That's good.
You don't have to invent that wheel necessarily yourself.
It's good. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about with this article, which I think is really good, is about how security with the information is changing, and from a business perspective and from a consumer perspective, and how we view that. So I wrote down some things, from a financial perspective, from a business-to-business perspective, from consumer security, social media security, things like how does data impact government type of elections, things like that. So I think the way we're viewing this from a security perspective is changing. Here's what the article said, which I thought was really good. In 2015, enterprises created less than 30% of data, while this figure will be nearly 60% in 2025. Regardless of where the data is created, enterprises must face the challenge of managing more than 97% of the global data that's created. Take the example of a user-generated content on social media. Here in a minute, we'll snap a picture, we'll put it on some social media platform. Although the individuals that upload the personal videos and photographs and then write text content, the social media site ultimately must store and manage the data on its infrastructure. So having access to and managing a growing amount of such personal data gives enterprises greater responsibility in managing privacy and security risks. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, and I'll ask you personally, has your thoughts on, think how many passwords we have and the data that we put out there about ourselves. Do you feel generally like that information is protected? Are you like me when you think there's probably a good chance that once or twice a year I'm going to get some note on my phone that my credit card's being used fraudulently, and I've got to hit 2 that I didn't choose to buy, 100 light bulbs in Chicago today. And so, and that's just, my thought is it just happens today. That's, and I'm okay with that.
The analytics are helping, right? The predictive analytics there.
You bet.
Cause that fraud detection to occur. The light bulbs were never bought.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Is that how you feel? Do you feel differently? Because there's some people I think that would go, I would never put this on, the web. I would never do this or that. What are your thoughts?
I think it's the hardest challenge, that there's still a lot of good work that can be done with biometrics and other ways to authenticate user data. There's also a ton of default passwords. The Uber that I rode in today had a little router in the back seat, and the password on that router is admin.
Yeah.
The user ID is admin, the password's admin. That data is not passing over an encrypted network.
Yep.
I also think that the tools that exist and that are being developed by government, by military, by utility, by business, the bad guys have those tools too, whoever the bad guys are, bad people that are nefarious individuals or companies that are formed to take advantage of that information. They have a financial model as well. And ransomware is real. This stuff happens. So it is really hard. Cybersecurity is, and how we will protect that data, I'm just not sure I have a very good answer. I feel like I maybe should just post my information. When we get done with the podcast, I'm just going to post all my personal information on social media and get it over with.
Do it.
And say, there'll be emerging businesses for that will help manage your data breach.
Sure.
That's how business... Somebody will come to the rescue of this.
Yeah. Well, and we'll end with this, but it talks about the article talks about that the percentage of data security will near. The percentage of data requiring security will near 90% by 2025, and it talks about 5 different categories that the data falls into. At the highest is lockdown, then confidential, then custodial, compliance driven, and private. And then the article highlights how each one of those, the security surrounding each one of those different types, will grow over the next 10 years. And so I think for me, as we depend, so one of the guys I used to work with, who I know, Brant Burnett at CBRE, great guy, and I just he's such a great person to work with, and I think a lot of him. One of the things he said about 8 years ago that I remember is, he said, I've looked through the Wall Street Journal today, and there's not one company I could find that's depending less on technology. And, I don't, no offense to Brand, I know he reads the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if he really looked through the whole thing, but his point was a good one. And that's, hey, companies are just exponentially depending more and more on technology. And as we put more with technology and it's more and more important, the security around it, increases. And I certainly don't think that is going to change anytime soon, even as the economy, ebbs and flows and ups and downs. I still think that the way companies and consumers value technology today and how it's changing their lives is something that will continue to increase. And it certainly feels like that. I don't know if you would agree, but that's how it feels to me, and at least the way we look at business today.
I think we're agreeing 100%. The fact that we're talking about this, that for lots of these IoT devices, sensor devices, the things that we just got done talking about how we're going to rely on, and how the drone that brings our pizza is going to be part of a lifestyle choice. The security around that is such an immature conversation today that it seems like that's where a lot of the work is going to have to be done.
Yeah.
I don't know how that will affect us, but that will be where lots and lots of opportunities. If I had an engineering student or someone who is IT inclined that was of school age, I would say cybersecurity, that's the business you ought to get in.
Yeah. What when you think about things moving forward, the industry and your role in it, Black & Veatch's role in it, what gets you excited about the next 10 years?
Well, I think that infrastructure is such a good platform for us. It's what I love and why I went to Black & Veatch. The platform from an infrastructure perspective is fantastic. So the ability to serve not only what's happening in Dallas, but what's happening in the world from an infrastructure perspective, it's pretty rewarding. It feels good to know that you're developing projects that are helping people's lives and improving security, safety, and just giving people power and water. There's a lot of things we take for granted that not everybody has.
Yeah.
And so it's a feel good kind of thing, and we all like that. If our business is also socially and personally fulfilling, it makes it a lot of fun to go to work.
Heck yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for coming in and doing this. It's awesome to hear your perspective, and again,
and yours.
You're the first person that we've done this with, so appreciate you walking through it with us. And
fantastic paper. I think that was a great choice.
Yeah, they did a very good job, and thanks to them for putting this out there. I thought it was a really good look at how the growth of data will impact our both personal and business lives and the way companies use data. So if this will be posted on our obviously our podcast, which is found at, and I'm going to do my best to remember this, both SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify. Boom. So yeah, you can get our podcast in 3 different places. You can watch it on YouTube as well as catch certain parts of it on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can follow Data Center Hawk or our profiles on there, and the content comes from that. And we've got plenty of other stuff that's there as well regarding data center industry growth, data center market, and how they're changing, and then on our site, datacenterhawk.com. So wherever you are, thank you for listening today, and we look forward to you joining us on the next one. Thanks.